Good day. My name is Anthony Barbera, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a segment of the series I'm doing on Elijah the prophet, based on my work on Elijah, Fire from Heaven, which is a novel was first published on March 29th, 2025. And having spent a lot of time with this individual in the Word of God, this prophet that was such a mighty man, I really felt it would be helpful if I discuss with you some of the things that I gleaned from it. And in this series, I'm going to break it down into a couple different sections. One will be just a general narrative overview, which is what I'm going to do right now. The second one will be the travels. How did Elijah travel throughout the country and the countries that he went to? And number 3, what's the chronology of the events that took place? But for today, we're going to look at a narrative overview of the whole thing. And the question that I always ask myself before I start writing a novel is this: why does this impact my life as a reader? Why is this important to me? What can I glean from a prophet that lived over 3,000 years ago? How does it apply to my life? And when you spend 3 years or more with somebody, you start to see things that you might not see if you read the record a number of times. And as a matter of fact, if there was one thing about Elijah that is magnificent, and the most important aspect that I've gotten from this whole adventure, it's this: there was nothing more important to Elijah than pleasing God, than pleasing Yahweh, doing what Yahweh asked him to do, doing his will. Neither family, nor prestige, nor anything else. And you think about this individual in relationship to your own life. As a Christian, here's a man that was extremely brave, really brave. He goes up on Mount Carmel, and we'll break this down as we go forward in this series, but he goes up on Mount Carmel with thousands upon thousands of people going up there to see this event. And he doesn't know what's going to happen. But he's got the worshipers of Baal. The country is turning because this is a war for Israel's soul, is what it is. This story and this record. And these people come up and they fill the mountaintop. Have you ever been to the top of Mount Carmel? It's a vast area expanse, and down to the left, or depending which way you're standing, you have the ocean. You can smell the breeze. But this mountain was filled with people. And this was an event where he was one prophet up there. So he was a great, brave man. And we'll go into that in great detail later. But for now. And then at the same time, he runs 13 miles down this trail to get to the palace before Ahab gets there, to see if Ahab has repented. And the first thing that happens is he asks Ahab, he says, listen, in essence, have you repented? Have you changed? You've seen what happened? And he goes, well, let me go talk to Jezebel. And the next thing that happens is Jezebel sends a messenger down and says, Elijah, if you're not dead, but by the end of this day, I'm not Jezebel. And he takes off and he runs like crazy in fear. So you see these two sides of an individual that are really, really unique. But always behind everything, his will is to please the Lord God Almighty. So that's an important aspect of this story. Also, we're talking about a country that these two individuals, because this is a story of about 3 people, not one. It's Elijah the prophet against Ahab and Jezebel, the most ruthless, vicious king and queen of Israel that ever existed. And as a matter of fact, if you look at 1 Kings chapter 21, in verse 25, it reads, "But there was none like Ahab, which did sell himself to work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up," or inspired. And that's part of the story. You see that in this situation of how she motivated him and got him to do what she wanted to do. And he did very abominably in following idols, according to all things, as did the Amorites, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. He was the most evil king that ever lived. And the thing about Ahab, you start to realize when you've read through this a lot, is Ahab is a politician. He's a politician. He's working both ends at the same time. As a matter of fact, when Elijah says to Ahab, "Hey, I want you to get everybody up on that mountain top of Carmel. Get all the people of Israel up there. Get the prophets of Baal up there. Get them all up there. And we're going to have a little..." This was a major, major event. And it didn't happen in an hour. It took days for the people to get up there. The king had to send messengers out. They had to get the people to come forward or to travel up to Mount Carmel. How many thousands of people were atop that mountain, I couldn't tell you. But a lot of people, thousands of people. And yet they could hear him when they were up there. But here's the thing I want to make a point of right now. That's this. Ahab didn't care which way this went. He didn't. When he got up there, he said, well, look, he's thinking in his mind, well, look, if all these prophets of Baal kill Elijah, great. I'm done with that problem. I'm done. But on the other hand, if something else happens and Elijah's victorious, well, who's going to get the credit? Well, I'm the king. I'm going to get the credit. So that was his attitude. He was a politician. And he was an evil man. And Jezebel was the evil queen that was able to manipulate. These two people she specifically was having the prophets of the Lord murdered. When you jump into the story, that's what's happening. In the first chapter, when Elijah is introduced, the first thing is that the time has passed. Time has passed. And they're murdering the prophets. Obadiah is hiding them, but they're murdering people. They're killing the prophets of the Lord. They're trying to take away God out of the country. These ruthless rulers thought that they could silence God in their country, but they hadn't counted on Elijah. Now, here's another point I'd like to make. Elijah does not present himself as a prophet initially, okay? He's never talking to himself about himself in light of him being a prophet. His sole, most important mission in life is to please God and to do what God wants him to do, regardless of his position. Okay? He's not about a position. Now, I do believe that Elijah was working, teaching in the school of the prophets before he ever went to Ahab and was told to go to Ahab. And then, of course, he went up to the river, the Wadi Fada, and stayed there. Now, that's another interesting aspect of this, because in terms of character, Elijah goes... First of all, God says, go tell Ahab it's not going to rain until you say so. That's what he did. Ahab, he didn't say this outright, was thinking, what are you doing here? Where's Micaiah, my prophet, who I don't particularly like anyway, but what are you doing here? So Elijah said, it's not going to rain until I say it's going to rain. And imagine this. He stayed, it's 3 years and however many months before it actually rained. So we know between being up on that drying up wadi, which is a river that flows really heavily when it rains a lot, and as it stops raining in this area, the water starts to dissipate. Well, there's a drought, so he's up there. We don't know exactly how long, year, probably somewhere in around a year, because then God says, I want you to get up and go to Zarephath. Now wait a minute. After he'd been fed by the ravens for this whole time, and the water was drying up, and he's going, here's the point I want to make. He did what God asked him to do in order that God asked him to do things. Now he's up there. Imagine yourself sitting up there on a river. You're getting fed by ravens. You're getting meat here. Maybe one drops an apricot he found somewhere, a dried up apricot. But this is not your everyday meal. Well, think about this. Then God says, okay, you're leaving. Get up. We're taking off here. So he goes, well, where am I going? And he goes, you're going to Zarephath, and you're going to meet a widow woman. Now, interesting, isn't it? Elijah says, wait a minute. He's thinking about this. Zarephath. Now, Zarephath is in the north. It's not even in Israel. You've got Tyre, Sidon, Zarephath. That's where Jezebel was born, in Sidon. And her father is the king of the Sidonians. He's the king of Sidon, which rules Zarephath, which, so he's sending Elijah into the midst of the enemy. Now, if you think about Elijah in terms of who was he from the record, pretty quickly you realize there's a lot of things you don't know about him. For instance, if you look at chapter 17 of 1 Kings, it says, and Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab. So the first record of Elijah is that he's from Gilead, and we don't know, he's a Tishbite, and we don't know who his family is. We don't know who his mother and father were, if he had sisters and brothers. We know that Gilead is a region on the other side of the Jordan River, and that was an area that was unique. It was called the Transjordan, which means on the other side. It was an area that Reuben, one half the tribe of Manasseh, and Gad wanted for their families, which is a story unto itself. And we'll get into that when we get into the kind of locations. But it is a hilly area, a rocky, hilly area. And that's where he was from. That's what we know. That's all we really know at first about him. So this is a unique aspect of him because we don't really know a lot about where he came from in his life in any kind of detail like that. So the question that I ask myself is, how old is he? We make these prophets all 65, 70, 80 years old. They're all in all the pictures, and they're all gray-haired old men. I don't believe that he was, and I'll tell you why. Because first of all, nobody runs down a mountain and runs 13 miles and beats a chariot to the palace of Ahab in the rain. Nobody 65 or 70 years old is doing that. And is the chronology of his life is uncertain anyway, but I believe, and I really do believe this, that he was somewhere in the range of between 25 and 35. So God says to him, I want you to go to Zarephath. That's where you're going to meet a widow woman. Well, he's up there on this wadi, right? After he had told Ahab it's not going to rain, God said, get up to the Wadi Farah. I want you to stay up there until I tell you to leave. He might have been there a year, because he's got to be somewhere between that place and her house in Zarephath. It's a good 3 years, right in that range, because he's got to have some time to go to Mount Carmel and a few other things. But he realizes that God's saying, I want you to go to Zarephath, to where Jezebel is actually the princess of the Sidonians, although she's now the queen of Israel. And her father is the king of the Sidonians. So God is sending him right into the heart of the enemy. And he must have thought, wait a minute, there's lots of widows in Israel. Why are you sending me to Zarephath? But here's the point. Here's a man that trusted the Lord and only did what God told him to do, except for on a few occasions where he just kind of got to the end of it. So anyway, he goes to Zarephath. Now here's the other interesting aspect of this. I'm just sharing this kind of in a broad scope. He's looking for a woman. Now imagine in his mind, he's thinking, now I'm probably going to get somebody that's older. She's probably got a nice house. Maybe she's got some good food, because there's no food over here. It's a famine. Okay. I'm getting fed from whatever these ravens are dropping me. But she's probably got a nice place and maybe some food. So, okay, that's where I'm going. The irony of it is when he gets there, he finds out that this widow woman he's looking for is probably somewhere in the age of 20, 18, 23, 24, and she's got a young child, a young boy. So, and he spends about 2 years with her, which makes for a unique situation. And he always wanted to do the Lord's will. And I think that's the most important aspect of understanding someone from any time in the Bible, whether it's the New Testament, the Old Testament. What is it that made them so unique? What made them so powerful? And then I think I'm going to end with this, because when he finally ran away from Jezebel, in great fear, it says he was in great fear, after he had run all the way down that mountain 13 miles. And this is a man that's used to traveling a lot, walking, great distances, because in Gad, it was a hilly country. This is a very athletic individual, very strong, very powerful. You don't cut off 450 heads and be a weakling. This is a powerful man. But anyway, when he finally ran and he got down to Beersheba and went to the desert, he was done. He said, I'm done, Lord. I am finished with this. I've done my. I don't want this anymore. And what happens in the record is so fantastic. It's so, and we'll get to that in another. You can read it. You can read it in Kings. All through these chapters, 17, 18, 20, 21, 22. But the thing is, it's not in chronological order. And that's why I wanted to make this point. So it took a good amount of time to set all this in chronological order. But let me end by saying this. When worse comes to worse, when he's at his lowest, he goes and he says, I'm done. Just like Jonah did. I wrote the book Jonah in the Time of the Kings, which was much easier in terms of chronology because it was 48 verses and it was linear. It just went, but that's not how Elijah is. It moves from different sections. One chapter will be all about Ahab. Another chapter will be all about Elijah. So you have to put the story together. You have to put the chronology together. There's wars. There's 3 wars. And I know women don't like reading about wars, but unfortunately, you have to have a sense of what's happening with these battles and why people are responding the way they are based on the fear. Because there's great, great, great fear in war. We haven't experienced it in our home country. But these people, there's death. When Ben-Hadad comes into your country and he's going to kill everybody, it's scary, which we'll get into in another episode. So let's conclude with this. What does he do when he's at his lowest point? And this is what he does. He gets up after the angel presents him with food, and it's a unique situation, which we'll get into later, and he heads for Mount Horeb. Okay, the mountain of Moses, where Moses went with the children of Israel. And he goes there because he's decided now, I'm going to go see the Lord in person. And the Lord's always talked to him. But at this point in his life, when he's at his lowest level, he says, I'm going to go speak to the Lord in person. And that's exactly what he does. I think